Hello, this is Alex from cables.gl. Let's take a look at trigger variable operators. And these operators are very handy for when you're interacting with your patch or you want to have specific situations that trigger a variable to change. And this variable can be one of four things, actually, because there are four operators that share part of this name and function pretty much the same. So if we open up the search and we type in Var Trigger, we'll see that there's one for arrays, numbers, strings, and objects. And objects can be 3D meshes or textures or even um, something a bit complicated for me, which is API requests from somewhere else. So you can trigger an AJAX request and get an object back and then parse it out. And then, for example, with this Var Trigger object, you'd be able to switch these objects that you received from somewhere else and then parse them down into some variables. But anyway, we're going to look at a much simpler usage of Var Trigger object, but it is super cool anyway. What I'm going to do is show you some pre-prepared patches, but we're going to start with Var Trigger Number, and I'm just going to create a new patch and hopefully cover some easy ways of setting up the whole like variable and variable receiver workflow. Okay, so let's put down our Var Trigger Number, and you will see that it has an error right away. And that's okay because the error just says no variable selected. So we need to create a new variable, or if we already have a bunch in our scene, we can just select it from this drop down. But you can see we don't have any, so I have to create a new one. And what I'm going to do is populate this number variable with values that then I will draw on the canvas with text mesh. So I'll put down a main loop and hold down Shift Enter, or hold down Shift and press Enter to just place it on the canvas, and keep my window open. And then I will put down a text mesh, and maybe since text mesh uses a string, right? Because it's text and it's words, and it needs a string input, and we have a number. In this case, we'll just use a number to string operator to switch it, so we can use this text mesh to display our number value. Okay. Anyway, that out of the way, what do we do now? So I have this variable with an error, and I need to create a new variable. So I'll create a new variable called trigger number. Okay, so the error goes away. Now, how do we get it into this number to string operator, for example? Because we can, of course, change it manually, but we have a value that we want to send to it from our operator. Okay, so what you can do is use an operator called get variable number. There it is, var get number. So it's it will receive any new variable change in this operator and then output it. So it also has an error, and it says unknown variable. Well, it has a drop down in the parameter field here, and we need to select our new variable that we just created for this var trigger operator. Okay, so we hook it up and then select our trigger number. And now, when I change this, nothing happens. Why? Well, because this operator requires you to trigger it, right? It's in the name. So, bam, there we go. Now it is updated. And if I change it again, nothing happens. I have to trigger it again. So that's fine, but it seems a little bit strange. Like, why would you need to do that? But what if you have, for example, some sort of user interaction, like use mouse buttons, right? So we have left click that will set this one, And I'm just going to copy paste this over. And secret, I actually bound this to my mouse, one of my billion buttons on my mouse, so I can just single click and quickly copy stuff. Okay, you don't care. All right, so let's change this number to like 2. And it's also not changing it, right? But both of these are set to the same variable. So what's going to happen is when I click left or right, it will change between these two numbers. So pretty cool. You obviously save some space and a bunch of like, um, having to wire up some other craziness, but you can use some sort of interactions or, for example, like other trigger ops to change between different variables for the same value. Um, I think that's pretty much the gist of how all the other operators will work. For let's look at string. So what I have here is a main loop and a text mesh again, and this time I have a string variable get, or var get string, right? So it is set to this variable I created called triggered string variable. And I have the same setup as before, where I have a mouse button left and right to trigger these different strings. And for fun, I use string editor in this one. So if we look here and type in awesome and save it, now it's not awesome. So I'm just gonna change the comment here to awesome, right? So this is my variable. It's no longer okay. And you will see over here on the canvas, oh, now I've interacted with the canvas, so it kind of updated it. But what's going to happen is when I click left and right, it will switch between cool and awesome. And, I'm just going to make this longer and check one thing is if I edit this to cool and save it and click the canvas, then, oh, you know why this is happening is because I'm left clicking on the canvas. Okay, nice one. Maybe I should get another coffee. All right, so that's pretty simple. And then we will go to um, an object, Var Trigger Object. So um, it sets the variable with a new object that it gets. So what I have here is a main loop, and I use a sequence here to kind of easily break out another cable to trigger my two geometries once, because I don't need to use them. I just need this geometry. So I just need to initiate this operator and get this object into my trigger variable objects operators. So what's going to happen is when I click left mouse button, I'll get a sphere. And then when I use the right mouse button, I'll get a cube. So let's try that out. Right, left, right, left. So, and this is being sent to this var get object. And it receives, just like the other two I showed you before, a variable that is set over here. And once it's triggered, it gets the new object. All right, so another thing I want to show you is over here, I've set up textures that are also using this object, Var Trigger Object operator. Because see, the color is the same, so they're all objects. So you can use them. But obviously, if you try to assign a texture as a geometry, you might get some errors, but avoid that. All right, so these ones don't have anything bound to the triggers, but the operator, this trigger operator, trigger variable operator, has a button here, so you can kind of manually test out your different objects being sent to the same variable simply by using the parameter panel over here. Okay, so right now I have this matcap being sent to the object, and if we go over to our matcap material, you'll see that I'm not using a var get object here. I'm using a built-in variable assignment in the parameter panel. And you might miss this sometimes, but there's these 3 dots next to every single parameter in a operator's panel. So for example, here there's some, here there's some. So you can assign variables without having to use this var get object operator or var get number and stuff like that. You can directly assign it inside the operator. So what I've done here is I click, let's erase it actually. So we have this brand new matcap material, and I want to send these different matcaps to it. So if I go over here and I click on these 3 dots here and I say assign variable, I'll get this matcap texture being controlled by a variable. And all I have to do is make sure to select something because, once you set this up, it's going to be on an unselected variable, so it's unknown. And we need to select the correct one. So my matcaps are being sent to a variable called trigger object texture. I select it. Now the port is darkened, and this will let you know that, yeah, you selected a variable for that parameter. So what's going to happen is when I click on this trigger object operator, we'll get a new matcap. Easy. And of course, you can, yeah, assign it to some other trigger. All right. So lastly, I want to show you a Var Trigger Array. And what I have here is a main loop with an orbit camera. See, I can orbit my point cloud here. Then I have a camera to kind of give myself some more control over the FOV, the field of view. Then I have a point material, and then I have a point cloud. And then I have this anim array set up. And if you haven't seen the tutorial for that, definitely check it out because this really makes it shine, I think, when you feed different arrays with interaction to it, I think. So what I have with my var sets on trigger or var trigger arrays here is the same as before. I have 2 mouse buttons bound to these different arrays that are going to be sent. And I wanted to show you this. I have my arrays for my point cloud, and for example, the sphere, set up in a parse array object. And if I edit it, you're just going to see this huge line of different values for my geometry array, or my, sorry, point cloud array. Okay, so how did I get those? I'll probably show you in another tutorial. But this way, I don't have to kind of do what I did here, where I'm populating the object or something like that, or converting the geometry to an array. I already have them somewhere. I got them from somewhere, and then I saved them into the parse array. So when I save my patch, I'm going to have these point clouds ready to go, saved in my patch. Okay, so look at this. If I right click, I have an animated array in the point cloud, and I can switch between these geometries with a click, which is pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So this was trigger var arrays, var trigger objects, and trigger var strings, and trigger var numbers. Hope you liked it. Bye.